Welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Kim, and today we will have our special guest, Marshall. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's not early here, but I know it's later there.
Yeah, for everyone who's listening, Marshall's actually in Seattle. Well, I'm in the lovely Brighton.
Mhm.
So the time zones are quite different. Um, my light is like blowing me out because it's actually getting kind of dark here, so you'll see a difference in our cameras. But I'd love to give our listeners a little more info on you and who you are. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you, and how did you end up in game dev?
Yeah, I'm Marshall. I about me. Let's see. Like I started in game dev, going to game school. I kind of fell into it, right? I started going to college for like jewelry design and set stuff for theater, and then um, that wasn't exactly supported by the college. And then I got into animation through stop motion because I like building stuff with my hands and working with my hands quite a lot. And then from there, I ended up stumbling my way into games because I had a strange conception of like what game design was before I was in the program. And I didn't think I was able to do it because I thought it was something very different than it was, if that makes sense. I thought it was all like just doing calculus and balancing data, and that's not what it is necessarily. Um, so that was kind of flipped on its head, and then I got on a track to become an environment modeler of all things. So environment prop modeler. I wanted to do UI UX design eventually, and then I eventually got a job as a game designer.
It's really funny that you thought that designers would be doing calculus and everything, whereas a lot of people in the like who want to get into the industry are like ideas. I get to make all the
Yeah.
ideas. It's a very different perception.
Yeah.
um, do you ever look back and do you ever want to dabble in the other areas like the UX,
Mhm.
UI design? You still want that?
Yeah, I've what I have found is that the thing that I like is the conversation with the player, and that's where all that stuff was rooted. Was the UI UX was like the direct interfacing of the game with the player, right? And I really like that relationship. I really like the conversation. Um, and in a lot of the design work I've done, it's always been about that. So it doesn't. I'm kind of a strange designer in that I don't care what I'm doing as long as I get to have that conversation, and it makes it hard to tell people what I do sometimes or what I like doing. If that makes sense.
Before you became a game designer, were there other industries that you were interested in going into and other career paths that you were looking into? And does any of that kind of play into what you do now?
Yeah, very much so. Before getting into games, I was a stage tech for theater productions. So I would mix live sound. I did some lighting operation. I did a lot of backstage work. Um, I was a grip for a lot. I did fly. If you know what that is, it's the bringing stuff in and out from the loft for a lot of musicals and a lot of like concerts and things like that. And it was what I thought I would be doing. Even I said I went to college for set design was part of the thing because I wanted to tie it into what I already knew. Um, Took a big career shift in college, but it's what's very strange to me is that I have met many people who have started off in theater and ended up in games, which is really. I've had conversations with these people. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why people do this. I don't know why why there's like a migration from theater to games. I imagine that they're similar in a lot of ways. You have your props department, you have your like set department. It's a lot similar. You have your like your engineers and your architects and things like that. And you're building a production. It all kind of has to go off without a hitch. Games in a lot of ways is a lot more forgiving than theater because you don't have to do it live. But
Yeah.
I think it's really similar in that it hits a lot of the same storytelling beats and stuff like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of feels like there's a similar connection to the audience as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
film is a bit different because, it's like recorded and it's out there, but like theater, it seems like you still have this kind of interaction and connection with the audience. So I can see it translating well, yeah.
Especially people that were like backstage going into like game design, it's like it's a very clear bridge. You have less of a thing when it's like, you know, somebody who like builds sets that is like a welder going into like set or like environment modeling. Not so much of a bridge, but yeah, I can definitely see the pipeline in the middle there. We had at the last studio that I worked at, we had people that would actually just like break out into song sometimes. And this is a fun story, but they a lot of musical theater kids is kind of what I mean. They would actually like during Halloween times dress up as characters and stuff and like put on little productions. It was really goofy.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think in our studio, well, because we have a whole audio department, so like audio department, so it's sort of like it's all mixed in. We have like all the creatives that just like to do performances and like
Mhm.
crafting. There's always like these like kind of common departments that fit into game development.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've worked at a few different studios from like free to play mobile and AAA. What have you found to be the differences and similarities within like development and the teams?
Yeah. This is a pretty typical thing that a lot of people in the industry know. That is, like the smaller the team gets, the more hats you have to wear, right? In mobile, I find that it's closer to the scale of indie, where you have a smaller team, people have to do a lot more than what they're specifically told to do, and you get more and more what's like the term is siloed as you go into the AAA space, where you do one thing, you do that thing really well, and you don't really cross teams as much. You end up with like cross discipline strike teams and stuff like that, where it's like, well, you need to develop this feature that is multifaceted. Well, we'll just pile more people onto it because that's what you have is more people. Um, that's the big one. The other thing that is kind of unexpected, I would think, with making that transition would be the scale of the communication and the scale of the like bureaucracy that changes. A lot of the times in like smaller studios and stuff, you can just kind of walk over to somebody's desk and say, "Hey, I'd like to do this." But at AAA scale, you can't do that as much. You're stuck with like, well, there's a whole process for this. You have to like reach out to the right person and get them to make a task that then needs to go through a meeting that then needs to be costed and all this stuff like that. And it's like that to save people from crunching as much as possible, because it's really easy for when you have a studio with that many people, that many ideas floating around, things just kind of blow. Things just kind of like feature creep, and um, this is the funnel to hopefully prevent some of that. You know?
Yeah. Um, can you, for our audience, can you give a rough estimate of like what you would expect like a smaller team to be, a smaller team size and a bigger team size?
Wow. Um, I
It's
mean,
okay
there's
if it's
yeah,
like
there's
a
some
round.
there's some indie teams that are like two or three people, right? And then
Yeah.
there's but like the mobile studio that I worked at was somewhere around maybe 30, maybe less, maybe like 20. Um, but the AAA studio that I worked at was, I think at our prime we were around 250, 300,
Yeah.
and like that's the difference is, and I mean some of that includes like a big QA team, and that includes like, um, a lot of like contract designers and contract artists and stuff like that. It does not include like XDev and uh, outsourcing and all that stuff. And if you did, then you'd be somewhere around 1,000 or something. It's ridiculous. And then people roll on and roll off in AAA more than they do in indie and stuff because the projects are longer. So
Yeah. I think mobile was similar for me, where my teams in mobile were around 5 people, 5 to 6 people. If anything, if it's like a big thing, it's like at most 10. And then at AAA, it was around 200 people on the whole project, and then maybe 15 to 20 people on the actual like feature team. So yeah, it's like interesting to see. Did you find any ways to make communication and working together in a big team? Like, do you have any tips on like how to make that more efficient or kind of flow better?
yeah, um, there's a lot of different ways, and it really depends on what your setup is. the I think that a lot of people are still, even today, trying to figure out how to make this work in like a hybrid remote environment. Um, I think people kind of over-indexed on over communication in today's world, and so you end up in a lot more meetings. You end up in a lot more like Slack channels and whatever it is, right? Where there's like a million of these things to try and over communicate everything to the like finest detail, so everyone knows what's going on, and I think that's too much.
Yeah.
Um, but in the days previous to that, it was as easy as just everyone kind of trusting each other and making sure that they were communicating outward and then highlighting when things weren't, and then kind of developing and um, pivoting your communication styles to fit the needs of other people, right?
Yeah.
Um, like systemized ways of doing it were like, well, you had your dailies and your weeklies, your stand-ups, right? And then whenever you wanted to roll out like a big feature, you'd have a meeting with all the stakeholders and then updates and stuff like that, right? Typical stuff. But in today's world, in like the remote world, it's a meeting every hour. It feels like, and that's
It's
I
too
don't know. We gotta
much.
find a balance. Yeah,
I cry at my calendar every day. I feel like I'm
yeah,
not working. I feel like I'm just constantly in a meeting.
yeah,
Yeah. But like I think you're right. I think a lot of it is trust. Um Trust in like letting people own like their features, the features they're in charge of. Trusting that they know, like delivering the vision clearly so that like you can all be aligned, but trusting that people can
hmm
carry that out. And um yeah, like it's also good to know who's owning things because I think a lot of the time the pitfalls we run into is no one knows who's in charge of what, and so no one knows who to communicate to, so the communication is very broken,
yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
not very efficient, and then we have meetings where everyone's in the meeting and then it just is hell.
Yeah, and you can very quickly end up in a situation where somebody owns something for a long time. People don't know that they own that. And so that ownership kind of gets shifted to somebody else because the people who don't know who owns it reassigns it or whatever. And then you end up in a weird situation where like a feature is developed under somebody's ownership when they don't know. I've seen that happen before. It gets kind of messy.
Yeah, it's so weird too, like I wouldn't recommend this as like a structural thing to like or like a uh like surefire way to improve communication, but parts of it are like just talking to people and getting to know them.
Mm, yeah,
Um, Going out for a coffee or a tea and like just talking to them as people. Like it really
yeah,
improved communication. Like really like even though we don't intend to talk about work, we end up talking about work. We end up talking about our
hmm
challenges on a very personal level. And so I think it really helps.
yeah,
um, but it shouldn't be like an enforced thing. But
absolutely.
yeah. So you've worked on massive titles such as Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. What were some key lessons you took away from working on such large projects and teams?
Uh, wow. Um, there were a lot of lessons. I mean,
Top
the
five.
well, Shadow of Mordor was what brought me into the industry, right? That was the first thing I got to work on out of college. And um, working on those teams really shaped me as a designer and really shaped me as a person in a lot of ways. So, top five lessons are um, don't compromise is one good thing with like vision. If if you know you're right in a design and you know you're right, fight for it. Don't obviously don't like tell your director to go to hell or whatever, but like at a certain point, like if you know that what you're doing is good and correct and right, don't just roll over when someone says no. Like really push for it and like maybe make a prototype of it and say, how about this? This is what I was talking about. Is this still a no? Okay, well then how can I make it a yes? Things like that. Because
Yeah. I think very thing that when you said it, I was like, oh, that's dangerous.
yeah,
Dangerous territory is Marshall. But like, I think you're right. I think because I roll over and I let people steamrolling. Like a lot
Mhm.
of it is, um, if you believe in it, there's a reason why you believe in it. And sometimes it's just the way that you communicate it that isn't landing. It's kind of like
Yes.
marketing your reasons for it. Maybe the person who's in charge of like the ultimate decision, like, doesn't know why it's important or why it would
Mhm.
work. And that's where like fast prototyping helps, because it's like, look, this is how it feels. This is how it works, and it can give them a whole different perspective. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, what we're talking about, right, is have confidence in your ideas, have confidence in your designs, and I mean, obviously, directors and things like that know the larger picture, and they can, if they say no to something, they probably have a good reason too. But there's a possibility that they're not seeing the thing that you're seeing. They're not seeing the number of times I've pitched an idea to somebody and they said, I don't know about that, and then I've shown them the prototype of the idea and they said, oh, that's what you meant. Unbelievable amount of times. Almost everything I've
Yeah.
ever made. It's weird.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
also when like directors have like the overall vision and they have a reason why,
mhm.
um it's kind of on them to explain why not,
Yeah.
so that you can understand as a designer or as a one of the team members like what we're going for. And I have learned that like, usually I'll ask, and if I don't get a clear answer, I just give up. But like
Mm.
it's like in the same vein. It's like keep asking. If you're not clear on it, like there's no shame in asking again. Like, no, that's not clear because of this and this. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because the more I grill my director, it's not just to like prove myself. It's not like, oh, I want to prove that I'm right. It's like, what are
Mhm.
you talking about? What are you not seeing? And are we actually seeing eye to eye? So yeah.
Yeah. I guess another one would be, and this is coming from a very strange AAA world perspective, I think, and this is something that I had to learn myself. Um, Asking yourself, like, is the amount of time that you're dedicating to something worth it? I think it's a
Yeah.
really hard question to answer and an important one to ask yourself. Um, we, I don't think this is any, I don't think this is breaking news. We crunched a lot in my career, and I eventually had somebody ask me, like, was it worth it? And for me personally, it was, because the amount that it developed me and what it gave me was my own thing. But for a lot of people, it wasn't. And like accepting that and making sure that it's like making sure that there isn't like a blanket answer to that question, and that you're actually thinking about it, and that you're asking yourself these questions. That you're checking in with yourself in these situations, I think, is really important, especially because this industry, especially in the AAA space, can really roll people over um, and abuse them to some extent. Um,
Yeah.
Asking yourself those questions of, is this worth it? Is this worth my time? Is this worth, do I care about what I'm doing enough to make these sacrifices, that kind of thing. Um, and it's okay when the answer is no. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay if you have a line and some self-respect and some boundaries and things like that, but that was a big lesson learned over the projects too. So
Yeah. Saying no is really hard.
yeah. Yeah.
I have a hard time with it. But like as I've grown in seniority, I've identified how it affects juniors and stuff, and so it becomes easier to kind of advocate for others. It's like, yeah, like I could crunch on this thing and I would because I like it. I like doing it.
Hmm.
But when I do it, it like isn't accounted for. Like they just think that the thing can be magically done within this amount of time, whereas like for most people it wouldn't be within the time frame of like a regular work day. And so usually when I do that, I tell whoever, like producers, everything, I'm like, I did extra work. This isn't like we actually went overtime. I want you to know that, and I'm okay with doing it, but we
Hmm.
need to account for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
Another good one is, and I mean, I know you know this. I know that a lot of people who work in games know this, but it's never about the project or about the studio or about the whatever. It's about the people.
yeah.
Um, for a long time, I always, even in college, before I had dream studios that I wanted to work at. I had places that were like, oh, one day I'm going to work there or whatever. That doesn't matter anymore to me. Like,
Yeah.
it's about the project. It's about the people that I work with. It's about like the the connections that I've made, and people like or people don't like to use the word family when it comes to business, but there is a lot of found family stuff in game development teams, and I have over the course of the Shadow games, I learned that there was a really tight knit group of people that accepted me, and they're still my friends to this day, even though we don't work together anymore, and we still meet up every week, if not more. Um, and that's really important. I wouldn't like if you're going into games thinking like, oh, I'm just going to be here, I'm going to work on my thing, and I'm not here to make friends, then that's wrong. Sorry, like you're not going to make it very far in this industry. I don't think.
Yeah, it's gonna reflect in the game that you're making too.
Yeah,
Like, if you want to make a game that's fun for people, you're gonna want to be in an environment where you're having fun. You're like, really connecting with the people you're working with, and that's gonna reflect in the game that you make.
yeah,
But it's also like it's absolutely about the people. I've had dream studios, dream projects. I've gone on those dream projects and actually felt like, oh, I actually want to go work on that lame game with like a bunch
yeah.
of my like found friends, my found
Mm-hmm.
family. And so, yeah, it's absolutely true. It's also like when you have this dream studio, when you get so attached to it, it's hard to see like if you end up in a toxic environment, it's okay to walk away. It's really
Yeah,
hard because it's like you don't want to because you're like, this was my dream. Without my dream, what do I have? But really, like, there are more
yeah.
dreams you can have. If it's a toxic environment, it doesn't mean that it's you. Like, it's just compatibility. Like,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has a different type of studio or team they're compatible with, and all you need to do is find the right one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
Those are really good lessons. I totally I totally relate to all of those. So I think it's really nice to share with everyone. Did you have any more, or do you want to
Did
move
I
on to the
have any
next
more?
question?
Um, it's hard for me to like
It's a very
consolidate
broad
things down
question.
into
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, I I may, if I can, I may inject two more in as we talk if I can think of stuff.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Well, the next question is a little bit tougher when we talk about uh, like segue in with those toxic environments and things
Oh,
that
sure.
don't go right. Um, some of the studios that you've been at have gone through major changes,
Mm,
like shutdowns or layoffs. Are there any patterns or common traits between them that you've noticed, um, like contributed to that struggle, or versus ones that thrived and were okay?
yeah. Um, as you might expect, I have a bit of a pessimistic view around this stuff. Um, but in both cases of studio closures, it was the publisher, the people who owned the game studio, didn't see the value in the game studio anymore for whatever reason, um, and wanted to get rid of it. Um, I don't know how much I can say, so I'm going to try to,
Just
you
vague
know,
it.
yeah. Uh, it's hard to know what publishers are going to do. Hindsight's always 2020, and you like look around and you're like, oh well, the writing was on the walls. Was it? Uh, we were all surprised both times it happened because both times we were working on something that was pretty cool, and um, we were pretty proud of what we were working on, and it was headed in a great direction. And then the kind of the rug was pulled out from underneath us, and here we are. So I think that to some extent, it's you have less control over it than you want to have, and it's hard to come to terms with that sometimes because you want to have control over it. You want to say like, well, if we make a really good game, then it doesn't matter. Like they can't say no. They always can say no. That's an unfortunate reality, right? Unless you are an indie project, the person above you can just decide one day that they don't want to do it anymore. And the reality is too, like it's not even necessarily the quality of the game or even the amount of money you're bringing in. You could be bringing in a ton of money and be overly profitable, and they can just decide that again they don't really want to deal with it anymore. Um, the market's tough and the industry's really hard. Um,
Yeah.
especially right now. This might age like milk, but like the industry right now is kind of bad. It's kind of rough in a lot of ways, and like not being in the industry necessarily. I mean, but like
Yeah.
the business side of things is really rocky right now, and it's hard to know what anybody's going to do. You know, with
Yeah.
Embracer doing what they did, what last year, 2 years ago, whenever that was, and then WB on our end, and then uh, whoever's next. It's always going to be somebody. Um,
Yeah. It's tough. It's so weird because even like creative industries as a business is a very weird concept, and I don't think we've really nailed down how
yeah.
to, you know, actually get it running the way it should, or make it flourish. It felt like it was for a while, but like I
Hmm.
think there's always this, like, I don't know, kind of in society now, it's like very like impatient. It's like we got to get
Yeah.
money. Like this makes money, let's do more of this. But it's very like nuanced the way that people like and buy games and what they want and how those interests shift, and um it's
Absolutely.
hard to like really nail down to like a pattern. You could for a while, but then that pattern like moves on, and like you're not making as much money, and there's like a lot of different factors. um so yeah, it's very tough, and it's strange because as soon as people see like, oh, this isn't bringing as much as I thought, like a lot of companies will be like, well, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. So yeah, it's really tough.
Well, there's the. This is something that we talked about a lot uh, during the last studio closure, but so we're obviously biased. But there is a trend that I think a lot of people in the AAA space are seeing, where the project sizes are going up, and the amount of money that publishers want to spend is not going up at that same speed.
Yeah.
And the amount of revenue people are getting from games is also not going up at that same speed. It's sort of like a like a game's arms race without any fuel behind any of it. Like it's so skeleton crews are building projects that are bigger than they ever have, and at a certain point the industry is going to reach a breaking point. And if you contrast that to what the industry looked like, 20 years ago, you had the same sized studios making two or three projects at a time that were much smaller condensed experiences, and there just isn't. Well, we're told that there isn't a market for that anymore. I don't believe that necessarily, but it's just strange how the market has developed, and the things that publishers want from the studios is so strange now and like impossible that it you have all these people complaining about like how games feel kind of generic, and how things feel repeated and sequels feel like DLC and stuff like that. Well, that's partially why it's people are doing the best they can, but at the same time it's like the things that people are asking for is impossible with the amount of team size and budget that the studios give us. It's or the publishers give us. It's just impossible. It's an impossible situation.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's so tough. I hope like eyes are opened over time and that we can
yeah.
shift that to a better situation, because I think more and more studios are running into that, and that sucks.
Hmm.
But I think eventually it'll, I mean, it has to, one way or another. That
Hmm.
realization will have to come. So yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
On a slightly brighter subject, in your experience, you've worked with a lot of leaders and been in a lot of different teams. So, what qualities stand out in strong leadership that you've seen? And on the flip side, what behaviors or decisions have you seen leads that lead to like poor morale or instability in the project?
Yeah. Um, it's complicated. Leading games teams is very hard,
Yeah.
and I've never done it, so I'm critiquing from the bottom down, which is easy to do. But something that has happened to me from a lead. Um, their ability to listen is really important. I think their ability to like hear people and adapt. And to flip that, the sign of a bad lead is somebody who will hear a critique and then go, well, that person's the problem, not me. I could never be the problem because it's my team, I'm in charge. That is immediately toxic. Let's not do that ever again. um, and I think in a lot of ways, it's really, really similar to design questions that we ask. If we get feedback on a project and that feedback doesn't make any sense, like, hey, I don't understand how to do this thing that they were tutorialized how to do 3 times. Well, the takeaway maybe is that the tutorials aren't doing their job, right?
Yeah.
So, in a similar way, if a lead receives feedback and their response is, well, that's not a problem, then that is indicative of a greater problem of how they maybe take feedback, which is not good for game development either. But if we approach it like a designer would and say, oh, well, then what is the actual problem? What are we actually trying to solve with this piece of critique? Then I think that goes a long way. And I've seen that in a lot of leaders and appreciate
Yeah.
it every time I see it.
I really like your tie-in with like how you think about design and how that that kind of matches because it absolutely is true. I've seen some leads that go, "Oh, that person didn't understand, they're dumb." And it's like, well, a lot of people aren't
Yeah.
understanding. So maybe like it's just a delivery, maybe like maybe it's not you, but maybe you could do something to to bridge that gap. So yeah, I think and yeah, in design too. How many times have you designed something that's really obvious but players still don't get
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah.
It's not their fault. Something's missing. So,
We've,
yeah.
at Monolith, we also had this idea of like good designs come from anywhere or good ideas come from anywhere. Is what we actually said. So, like, it doesn't matter. It's because we've all worked on like weird teams where like that are so siloed and disjointed that if say somebody from QA has this insight into this thing that they're like, hey, why is this built this way? It should be built this way. It's really easy to shut that person down because they're not like working on stuff. Um, but the contrast to that is we're too close to something and they're not. Like,
Yeah.
um, and so we had this philosophy: yeah, good ideas come from anywhere. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be someone off the street. You could be someone's spouse that they brought in for a company party or whatever. If they have an idea, listen to them. Because if it's a bad idea, it's the same amount of time for you either way. Like you hear the idea and you go no, or you hear the idea and you go yeah, actually. But as long as you take it with you know a little bit of a grain of salt, and as a designer, and you listen to them, there's probably a good reason why they said what they're saying.
I have
So
this like weird way of framing it where it's like no idea is bad, it's just doesn't fit the situation. Like anything could
mm-hmm.
work, it just depends on what you're going for. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like people ask me like if there's any foods I dislike, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of dislike these things, but I feel like if you cooked it a certain way, like a different way, I
Yeah,
probably like it.
I've often said like when it comes to cooking, I don't like that on its own, but as a component in something, maybe you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's really similar. Like you would never, I don't know, maybe some people would. You'd never eat a whole head of garlic, but God, I love putting garlic in things. Like
Koreans do. Sometimes they do.
I
We
know.
like chop them up and eat them.
And my dad ate onions like, or my grandfather ate onions like apples, but I would never. It's one of those. Yeah,
There's that one video of that kid that was like, "This is an apple," and they're like, "No, it's an onion," and it's like, "No, it's an apple," and it's like, "Okay, eat it." The kid eats
yeah.
it. It's like,
He cries.
it's my favorite. It's like really not letting go. It's like, no, I'm gonna take this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that
But yeah,
makes
good ideas come
sense.
from anywhere. I think that's a really strong, and that has to come from the leadership down. Like it can't come from the bottom up because if the leadership doesn't believe it, then you can't ever make it actionable. I don't think it has to be like ingrained and kind of pushed and modeled by the people that are in charge, right?
Yeah, I think like what I've seen is when this happens, like the whole like it's someone else's fault, not mine, and they don't take accountability. A lot of it comes or stems from people who it's part of the industry's fault, like too, because the way
Mm,
we structure progression in career, it's like
sure.
usually like you go senior and then like principal or lead, and like lead is always like you're always trying to like go up and you have to be
Yeah.
a lead, but lead involves a lot of like people management and project management, and like it's doesn't mean
Yeah.
like you're a good designer, but it's often seen as like I have to be a lead to be a great like expert designer.
Yep.
And so people who are pushed into that, like that's their mindset, instead of like I actually want to lead a team and I care about the people and I want to manage people. And like it's fine if you don't initially want that, but like we should probably have some sort of training for people who are going to
Well,
lead others.
yeah, that's another thing that Monolith did a lot different than a lot of other studios that I really appreciated. Um, they didn't have a vertical ladder. They had a ladder that kind of this is going to sound really bad. They had a kind of an inverted pyramid where it was like you could go up, but then once you reached a certain point, you could start going laterally. So you had like for example, my final title there was advanced designer locomotion was my final title there. Well, what does advanced mean? Well, advanced is a lead level content producing designer. So I was the same level on the ladder as a lead, but I wasn't in charge of people, right? Um, and we had people that had the title of like master animator. What does that mean? Well, that means that they're like basically director level, maybe a little under, but they're only content producing. They're not directing. They're not managing people. They're not doing that kind of thing. And so you could really have that specialization uh, of being a content producing person versus a people leading person, which means that you end up with people leading people that don't know necessarily the intricacies of the people that are at their level for content production. And that's okay. And I think that's what scares people is that like having somebody in charge of you who doesn't know what they're doing necessarily sounds scary, but I think that puts the onus on them to just trust. They need to
Yeah.
trust the people underneath them and be more in the lane of like facilitating the development structure rather than driving the content.
Yeah. I think it usually just gets messy when they're trying to do both, really. It's like
Yeah,
I'm going to be in it, but I'm also going to be driving it, and then it gets a little muddy. But
yeah.
yeah.
And I think in a lot of those situations, like once like as an industry, people that move into being a lead need to accept the fact that they are leaving the content world behind to some extent, and that they are then having to put more trust in their team, and that is part of becoming a good lead. And I think that that hasn't. I think that's what you mean by like, well, we need training. That needs to be part of the training, and it never
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Um, because I've seen so many leads go into that position where they're like, they still have a stranglehold, like a knuckle, like a white knuckle grip on the content, and it's like you need to let go because you
Yeah.
just made this decision, and
Sometimes that's like a structural thing in the studio as well, though, because
yeah,
like some studios that have blame culture, which like no studio that has blame culture is like, we have blame culture. They're always like, we don't
yeah,
have a blame culture. And like sometimes even strongly say, we don't have blame culture here, but they actually do. And then when
hmm
they have it, like leads who are in charge of everything are scared to like trust their team because they're like, no, I'm like gonna be blamed if it isn't right. So.
and you also have the flip side of that too, where you have studios that are so anti-blame culture that it's hard to track down where problems are.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot too, where it's like, well, somebody screwed something up somewhere along this pipeline. And I ask who, and they say, well, you don't need to know. And I'm like, no, I need to know so I can go help them. Like, please let me go, like, teach them how to do this the correct way so that this
It's
doesn't happen anymore.
like in the same food group as like toxic positivity.
Yeah,
Like you're like, "Oh, nothing to see here. Everything's great."
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I said it was like a less dark topic, but it kind of went
I mean, it
dark
is.
there. Yeah. Um, well, let's go into like an actual
Mm-hmm.
fun topic. What are your design philosophies? Like, what is your design thought process like? And and what do you really take from different design positions? Because I know you were a world designer and then
Mhm.
you were a locomotive designer. Is that how you
Locomotion
say it?
designer, yeah, locomotion.
Locomotive.
Which is, I mean, some every title that I've had is like a weird title. I started off as like a design generalist, and then I went over to being a world designer, which is basically just a level designer, but with more piled onto it.
Hard
And
mode.
then and then I did level design in mobile, and then but that also wasn't just strictly level design. I did a bunch of mission design and a bunch of other weird stuff too. And then I also did some mission design when I went back into AAA, and then I did more world design, and then I now I'm a locomotion designer, which is also called a 3Cs designer in some places, or sometimes the job isn't even done by a designer; it's done by like a technical animator. I don't know; it's all over the place.
Yeah,
But um, design philosophies are strange. I have found that they, if you have a solid design philosophy, you're probably not a very good designer. That's one thing that I've learned. Your design philosophy should ebb and flow and change with like everything that you're doing. But one thing that I have found, and this is like every reductionist thing out there, like there are two kinds of people. That's what I'm going to do. Is not accurate. um, what I have found is that you can put almost any designer on a spectrum of what I call like an academic designer versus a rule of cool designer. So there's like a spectrum that you can have. Um, a lot of people argue with me on this. It's reductionist. It's not accurate. I get it. But like the general idea is that like you more academic designers are people that are really like they dive into things like game theory and they document everything along every step of their process or whatever. And they have a very structured way of looking at design and they want to develop a feature. They already know what they're going to do. They're going to start with like a white paper or whatever, and then they're going to get critique on that and critique on that, and then iterate on it, and they're going to make a prototype in the end, and they're going to stick the landing. It's going to be a perfect feature, which no one should believe that it never works.
yeah.
But then the opposite side of that is you have your rule and cold designer, which is don't worry about it, I'll just do it. And that's scary in its own way because no one knows what the hell they're doing. But basically, it's like the don't worry, we should just do this because it's cool. We should do this because it's interesting. We should do this because it's going to make the game better because it's good. And all of that is subjective. None of that is based on any kind of evidence or fact finding or anything like that. And I think you can put anybody on that spectrum. There's somewhere most people are somewhere in the middle. Nobody's at the extremes. But this has helped me a lot in communicating with other designers in like why they are the way they are and what they want to do.
I've
And
definitely met people at those extremes.
yeah, I've worked with a lot of people at the extremes too, but the what it means to me as far as a design philosophy goes is that when I'm communicating with those people, I can adapt my own communication and my own design philosophies to meet them kind of in the middle, right? I'll never approach a more academic designer with like, well, we should just do it because it's cool, because they don't care about that. They want to know how this fits into the larger systems of the game and why it improves those systems and supports the surrounding structures. So I need to know, well, this is how I have to approach this to communicate with them. Where it sits with me is it helps me identify where I am and helps me look at the decisions that I'm making and the ideas that I have and then shore them up with the other side that I'm missing, right? So like right now I'm working on a little personal project on the side. I'm starting with a white paper. I've never done that before. I'm just designing the whole thing on paper and seeing how it goes. I don't like doing it, but I'm doing it because it's good for me. It's eating my vegetables. And I think that's important. My usual design process is, and this depends on if I'm talking about a project or if I'm talking about a feature in like a larger AAA thing or whatever, right? My usual process is I identify a need, right? We need this for that, or I need something for like a, if I'm making like a project, there is a need in that this thing doesn't exist, or I want to make this thing because I think it would be interesting, whatever that is. And then I start building it. I just go. I don't think about it. It tells you where I am on the spectrum. I just start building things. I start building a prototype. I start building things because I think sculpturally I want to be able to like build something, to build on that, to change this, to modify that, to sculpt the thing in the direction of what is correct for the design. And I don't know what the correct direction of the design is until I get in there. And I'm a firm believer that no one knows what the correct design is until it's made, and it's always too late. And so getting ahead of that, failing faster is the term that is commonly used. Getting ahead of that by building stuff is usually how we do it. And when you build things, you can have a conversation about the thing because everybody can experience it from their own angle. You can't do that with a white paper. You can't do that with a design doc, because everybody interprets that differently, or a pitch or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my
I
yeah
absolutely agree. Even though I'm like on the other side of that spectrum, like I
yeah
usually like plot everything out. Luckily, it's worked out for me. Like when I do
yeah
it, it's like, ah, it worked. It worked how I thought it would. But like I do think it's better to just get it out and build it because even if it does end up working, um, the stuff that I planned like was different when it was built. It was different in ways that I didn't expect. It still worked, but like there were still things that like if I just built it, it would have been faster to
hmm
get to. Yeah.
yeah
But on the flip side, yeah, it's that spectrum. It's like you do
hmm
want to be in the middle. You don't want to be on one side or the like other of the extremes. But yeah.
yeah because if you just built a bunch of stuff out, it could be bad, and then you have to throw it all away. Like it's harder to. There is no right answer. I think that having a multifaceted team, and this is maybe important when we're looking at like hiring and stuff, like being able to identify where people sit on not this spectrum, but like how they think about like design and things like that. Having a varied pool of people who think about design differently, you'll catch things in different ways. Like if I show you a prototype for something that's like kind of half built, and I'm like, maybe, and you're like, well, no, this doesn't fit into anything in the game that we're doing. Like, that's good.
Yeah, it happens a lot. I it's like why I like my directors to know like they're usually the ones that are like this is what I've plotted out, this is what I want and then like I can go and build it and then see if it fits and like adjust.
Yeah,
That's my preferred way, but like it's a mixed bag. You could get anything out there, so
yeah.
yeah.
Which sometimes the best ideas come from that, right?
Yeah.
Things that don't necessarily like fit the same mold as the rest of the game, like outlier features and stuff that are really interesting. That's how you get innovation, right?
Yeah, it's it's crazy because I'll have instances on projects where it's like do this impossible thing, it doesn't fit at all, but I think it's cool. And it's like, well, I have no choice but to make that work. So how
Yeah,
do I make that work in a reasonable way? And it just kind of morphs into this like it works. It's weird, but it works and it actually makes it better because it's unique, but it's still weird.
hmm hmm
Yeah. But it was birthed from this unreasonable
yeah,
ask, yeah. So it is kind of like a beauty in it.
yeah.
Okay, so I have a last question. Well, no, I'm gonna ask you another question after this, but
Okay.
um, what are your favorite tools when you're designing?
What
That's
a
a very
huge
broad
question.
question.
Yeah. We're talking about like software mostly. Is
Mm,
that the idea?
anything. Paper
Anything? Great.
prototyping, like I don't,
Yeah,
it's a very broad question. Excel, like
sure.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm in a really weird position where the studio that I've worked the most at, Monolith, we used all in-house proprietary software. So all of our tools were developed by people who sat in the office. They were built from whole cloth, and they were the same tools that the studio had been using for 30 years. So it's hard to have like a favorite tool that is like industry standard that people know what the hell I'm talking about,
Yeah.
because I don't necessarily have one. I use a lot of Unity for things because it's easy to work alone on something in Unity. There's a lot less overhead than there is with like Unreal. Um, I I am finding that Obsidian is a great tool, and I think that everyone should use Obsidian. It's so good. I don't know if you're familiar, but
Uh, I haven't used it. I have a friend that hates it.
oh, that's funny.
It's very funny. Yeah, but maybe
It's
they're not using it right.
maybe it's basically just like a notepad that is multifaceted. So you have like you could do inline markup in your notepad stuff. So like if you reference a feature, you can put that in brackets and it'll link to the page of that feature. So you can have like a notes page. It's sort of like your Confluences or whatever, where you can do like embedded links and stuff, but it's all within like a Notepad doc that is like a
Mm-hmm.
shared notes vault that you can like share with people and stuff. So it's like an
Nice.
internal, like a localized Confluence kind of, and you can do like node graphs of things and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. I use it a lot for writing for Dungeons and Dragons,
Nice.
but it's I started to think about using it for like game development, and I think it would be really good. And I worked with people who did, and they raved about it. Um, I use a lot of Maya because that's just what we were taught in college, and that's stuck in my ways. I want to learn Blender really bad. I'm lazy, and I don't because I don't buy. I don't have an impetus for learning Blender, so
I think
doesn't
that's
come
like
up.
a common feeling.
Yeah,
People who have learned Maya as their like first,
they don't want to use it.
they don't
Yeah,
want to relearn everything. They're like,
yeah.
why? I already know. But like, I want to.
Hmm.
Want to. Yeah.
Um, what else? Uh,
You used to
I
be really like big on Excel. I remember you used to like
well,
build out a bunch of simulations and everything.
I don't know that I like using Excel,
Oh.
but it is useful for things, and it it is what we used at Glue the Mobile Studio. That's all we used. We used that for everything. I like the joke that we designed levels in Excel because it's not entirely wrong,
Yeah.
um, but it is a tool that does what it needs to do, and it does it really well. And it's hard to find a comparative tool. People say Google Sheets and stuff, but um, those are my big ones. I used to have a lot more of like a diverse, like I liked ZBrush. I liked more artistic stuff. I've kind of fallen back as I've left that like environment prop modeling stuff, and then kind of moved away into. I mean, hell, we learned Flash in college, right? That's not a
Me.
thing anymore. So there's a lot of tools that have kind of like fallen to the wayside as I've gone. But um, yeah, these days, if I'm going to be working on a project, it's going to be probably Unity, Photoshop, Maya.
Yeah, Photoshop is a big one. I use Photoshop for a lot of design documentation and paper prototypes. It's crazy.
Yeah, eventually maybe you'll hear me say something like Procreate and Blender and like other stuff that I wish I could know, but
Yeah,
it's
Godot. It's
yeah,
just plain
Godot instead of
Godot.
Unity. Yeah, but
Yeah, yeah. I know, like Jeff was learning Figma. I was like, Figma is very
mm,
useful. Because I just fake everything. I fake UI and everything in Photoshop. Or
yeah,
like if you ever try to do it in PowerPoint, it's it is such a pain. You can do it. It's not the most efficient.
yeah. I remember an internship a long time ago. I learned C4D or Cinema 4D. That was a really cool modeling software that you could do all sorts of stuff because basically everything was an effect, sort of. Um, and it was all like you layered things on top of other things to like modify models. You didn't really ever like extrude faces and stuff like that. It was like I don't know, you just apply layers on top of things to like change the shape of something, and it was really cool. Uh, but maybe one day. And then we did use a lot of Houdini. Um, that was exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
That's been integrated in a lot of stuff recently. It's kind of a nightmare, but it's neat in its own way.
Yeah, when you first started talking about it, it sounded really cool. I mean, it still does, but
Yeah.
okay. Last question. It's my favorite question to ask people.
Okay.
But might be broad. I don't know. Um, if you could go back in time and talk to, young designer Marshall, what would you tell him?
God. uh, I don't know. I think nothing. It's a weird answer, I think, but like I don't. I've always been one of those people who's like, yeah, if you go back in time and change it, it's like, well, I wouldn't change anything with me because I kind of like where I am.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, you know, I've made a lot of like, I don't know, like missteps But I think that again has like shaped me into where I am. So I don't know that I would like philosophically I disagree, but also at the same time, like if I'm gonna play with the question, I will. I'd probably say something like the advice that I was giving earlier, right? Like learn where your line is, um, learn if it's worth it, um, and don't be afraid to say yes and no to that question because like a lot of people when they are faced with like the is it worth it question, they get really critical and they say, oh no, it's not worth it. No. Sometimes it is actually. It's fine. You can definitely say that it's worth it to kind of burn yourself down at both ends a little bit, and to not be as afraid of the industry. I think that's a big thing. I was when I first joined the industry, I was terrified. I didn't know. I was always you hear about people like, well, you don't want to do this because then you'll get blacklisted. You don't want to do this because then you'll never. It's such a tight knit industry. People talk like it feels very intimidating, like a popular kid club of like or like a small town. It's like you'll sour your reputation. You'll never work again. It's like to some extent that is true, but you have to like almost try for that to be the
Yeah.
case. You gotta be a pretty bad person for that to happen. But I was terrified. I was like, I'm gonna screw up a project and they're never gonna forgive me, and that's not true. Um, I think that would alleviate a lot of stress in my life
Yeah.
and a lot of other people's life if they accepted that early on. There's version control. You can just revert. It's fine. You don't have to worry
it's
about anything.
it's true. And people
Yeah,
make mistakes. It's like they're all fixable. You can fix it.
yeah.
It's fine.
Sometimes mistakes are good. They
Yeah.
they push you in cool directions.
Yeah. I think that's really, really good advice for everyone, even if you wouldn't tell yourself anything in the
Yeah.
past.
No, I'd let past me suffer.
It helps you grow. I
Yeah.
feel the same way. I always say that like I wouldn't change anything except for that one day where I stepped on that snail. Like that's my only
Oh,
regret
sure.
in life.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like don't step on snails.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your knowledge and your advice and your experience. It's been really like a great pleasure. And thanks to everyone who's listening for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you.